time for a self check-in. A few days ago, I spoke on having a mental health toolkit and how valuable that can be for your life. To my surprise, it seemed to really positively affect a lot of people who were able to hear it. Aside from that, several people mentioned that there was someone who wasn't there that they wish had been there and been able to listen to it. Because of that, I decided to go ahead and just give the speech again, I guess, and record it, and upload it here to YouTube. You know that I really care about your guys' mental health and that I'm really invested in the necessity of taking care of yourself. So this seems really appropriate for the channel, and hopefully the tips will help you. When I say a mental health toolkit, what I'm actually talking about is a medical bag. And there's a visual for this, and I will try to link it in the description below so you can download it for yourself if you want. But the reason I choose a medical bag, like a doctor's bag, instead of a toolbox, is because we have a tendency in our culture to view mental health as lesser in importance. That, you know, your leg's not broken, your heart's not giving out on you, you're fine, just deal with it, The one thing that I hear or have heard most often, I think, in reference to this kind of stuff, mental health stuff, is it's all in your head. This actually ties back to exactly why I choose a medical bag, because, yeah, it is. It's all in your head. It's literally physically in your brain, and there is nothing you can do to get away from it. It's the only place on earth that you can't get away from. So it is just as necessary to address your mental health as it is to address your physical health. In fact, your mental health really is part of your physical health. It's got to be centuries of prejudice and misunderstanding that we separate these two things. So, medical bag. This is a medical situation, and it's just as important as if your heart, your liver, your lungs were giving out on you or were in distress. So we are going to address it from that standpoint. Okay, new day, new outfit. Let's get into this. So most of these are in no particular order, but I did put the first one first because I do think it's actually the most important. And the very first tool I think you need to have in your mental health care toolkit is honesty. And that's honesty with others, but it's mostly honesty with yourself. The very first thing you need to do in order to address your mental health care needs is be honest with yourself. Do you need help? Due to centuries of cultural assumptions and lack of research, mental health has a huge stigma in our culture. A lot of the time, we tend to view especially issues like anxiety and depression, which are two of the most common issues, as just being a personal weakness. And that's just not true. Not at all. It is a physiological condition a lot of the time, and even if it's not physiological in some way, like I said in the opening, it's in your head and you can't get away from it. For some reason, we tend to view it as just not that big of a deal. And, you know, so-and-so down the street just lost their job, and this person that I work with, their mom is deathly ill, and you know, I saw a story on the news and all these people have horrible things going on, and so I'm fine. I'm totally fine. It's totally okay that I can't sleep at night and I wake up feeling like I can't breathe, or I make it to the couch and then I don't move. It's not okay. You need help. And you need to be honest with yourself about that. The metaphor that I like to use is, think about if you were in your house looking out the window, right? And you see across the street that this huge flood has come in from nowhere and is absolutely washing your neighbor's house away. And you're like, wow, that really sucks. Good thing my life is going just fine. I'm totally fine. The only problem being that your house is burning down around you. Okay. Don't stay in the burning house. Just because your neighbor's house is getting flooded and it's a different disaster and they're also losing their house doesn't mean that it's okay for you, that you do not have to stay in your burning house, that you asking for help is not in some way damaging your neighbor or taking away from whatever suffering they have. And also, you're not weak for getting out of your burning house, for asking for help to get out of your burning house. It's okay. In fact, it's a little bit silly to just stand there in your house and let it burn down around you. So just be honest with yourself. Probably the easiest way to know if you need help is to See if the issues you're having, whether it's depression, by which I mean, you're sleeping too much, you can't find joy in anything, just everything makes you tired, everything, and all you want to do is sleep. That's just an example of symptoms. Of course, they can be different. Or anxiety. Can't sleep, wake up, brain rushing all the time, always feeling tense, always feeling nervous. If these things are interfering with your daily life, if you are having these symptoms, if you're experiencing these things more than 3 days a week, you should be looking for professional help. By the way, just a quick disclaimer, I am not a mental health professional, okay? This is a toolkit for you to use on your own and help you out, but I am not a replacement for a mental health care professional. The second item for your mental health care toolkit is to gather the support of your family and friends. This kind of ties back to being honest. Once you've been honest with yourself, you need to be honest with your family and with your friends. And I 100% understand that this is not an easy thing to do. You have to remember, I'm saying this after accepting my situation over a decade ago. And it's probably, I've been somewhat honest and done a decent amount of self-advocacy increasingly over the years, but it's probably only been the last 12 to 18 months that I've been 100% honest with my family and friends about what I need. A good example of this is that just last year, I started being super honest with my family. Like, I cannot socialize for long periods of time. It's really hard. It has nothing to do with you guys. I just have to take breaks. I just need a break from the noise. And then we all went on a giant trip together. And we all had our own little cabins. And then we had one big area where we were all hanging out together. And because I had been honest with them and told them what I needed, I had absolutely no guilt saying or not saying anything and just stepping out and going back to my cabin for a little bit, putting in my headphones and taking a break. And my family didn't feel like I was trying to avoid them. They didn't worry that they had somehow offended me because they knew why I was leaving. And they let me know that I was missed without coming, because in the past, people come looking for you. They're like, hey, where are you? Are you coming? Come join us. We want you there, which is love and support, but not what I needed. So at this experience, they were coming and being like, hey, just wanted to let you know we were thinking about you. And then they left. And then I showed up later. And because of this, instead of pushing myself for the first 2 days of the trip and then completely falling apart and doing nothing for the last part of the trip, I paced myself and I had a really great time. And it's probably the first time I've gone on a vacation and not had some kind of shutdown where I had to spend an entire day or more hiding from everyone and everything. And I didn't even really have recovery when I came back, which was miraculous. I've never had that experience before. So I understand that not everyone has family that is going to support them or can support them like that. A lot of people's families don't really believe in mental health. That is not a reflection on you. It's a reflection on them. Just like if your friend told you that they had cancer and they told their parents and their parents were like, what are you getting chemo for? Who does that? That's lame. It's on them. It's not on you. And certainly there are ways to approach it where you can educate about what the situation is, what the experience is like for you. A lot of the times there's going to be a learning curve, but for both of you, really. But don't give up. And if your family can't support you, turn to your friends, turn to the family you've built, and be honest. The third thing for your mental health care toolkit is what I call mutual support. And what that means is finding people who have experienced the same thing as you have. The internet is amazing for this, okay? We have the community here, which, while tiny, still loves you. And there are just so many places online where you can go. There are support groups, there are forums, there are subreddits, there are Facebook groups, there are just everything. And the nice thing about finding mutual support on the internet is that you can stay anonymous if you want. If you're not ready to have that tied to you in real life, if you're not ready to be honest with family and friends just yet, you're just not quite there. If you're still looking for more validation to make sure that what you're experiencing is real, it is. If that's a thing for you, which I experienced for a very long time, obviously, you can find the friends you need, you can find a lot of support, and a lot of people who just really get it. The fourth thing for your mental health care toolkit would be therapy. I know that just like there's a stigma against having a mental health problem, there is also a stigma against therapy. Let me preface all of this by saying I think everyone should have therapy. Whether you have a diagnosable mental health problem or not, everyone finds value in speaking to someone who is not invested in the problems in their life and who can give them an impartial ear to listen to what they have to say without having to worry about upsetting anyone or hurting anyone's feelings. It's really great. There are a couple of things that I want to add about therapy before I move on. First, do not be afraid to therapist shop. And by that, I mean, there are so many people, myself included, who go to therapy for the first time, try it out for a little bit, and are like, this is not helping me. I must not really have a problem. And then they leave. This was before, there was like 5 years before I accepted that I had an issue, which was a decade ago. So, like 15 years ago, I tried therapy a couple of times and didn't feel like anything was helping. So I was like, clearly I'm just fine and I'm making everything up and it's all in my head. Yeah, it is. And I still haven't gotten away from it. The real issue was just that I hadn't found a therapist that fit with me. Just like it takes you a little while to find a good friend or a good dating partner, it might take you a little bit of time to find a good therapist. Okay? If you go see a therapist for a few sessions and you're like, this just really isn't gelling for me, don't be afraid to change therapists. And they understand that this is part of the process. They're not going to take it personally. They're not going to be upset with you. A lot of the time, they'll even offer you suggestions of other people who might work better, especially if after a few weeks, you can communicate what you do need, because sometimes finding what you don't need helps you find what you do need. Okay. My first therapist just wanted me to talk about my feelings. That was not something I was ready for at that time. I needed somebody who was going to give me tasks that I could take home and work on. So that's what I eventually found. And I was like, oh my gosh, therapy is the best thing ever. Therapist shop. The other thing to remember with therapy is that mental health issues are similar to a lot of recurring health problems. Some people may find that they go to therapy once, for 6 months, a year, whatever, and they get some tools and it helps and they're totally fine after that. And they're able to maintain as they go forward. For a lot of people, that's just not the case, okay? Most people do not get the flu one time in their life. Most people get the flu several times across the course of their life, even if they're getting the vaccine, okay? And just because you had the flu once before, and then you get it again 10 years later, or 5 years later, or the next winter, does not mean that you have failed in some way. It means that you need more help, that your body needs more help. And it's the same thing with needing to go back into therapy. I have taken breaks from therapy several times over the years. I have been back in therapy 4 or 5 times, I think, at this point, and I'm about to start looking for a therapist again. And that's just kind of something that I accept about myself, and I don't beat myself up for that any more than I do beat myself up for the fact that I need a flu vaccine every year to keep from getting the flu, because I'd rather get the vaccine than the flu itself. Yuck. The fifth thing for your mental health care toolkit would be calming aids. And these can vary a lot from person to person. So I strongly recommend figuring out what calms you down when you're not worked up. It's better to have a list, and I do write it down. At this point, I don't need to. When I first started, I did, because when you get worked up or when you get really depressed and are really like, bleh, it can be hard to remember or find the motivation to do these things or use these things. These should be things that you don't really have to put any effort into. I'm mostly talking about some kind of sensory thing that calms you down, whether that's a sound, okay, like beach sounds, rain, whatever. And it doesn't have to be like nature sounds necessarily. If there's just a certain artist that you really love, if there's a certain song you really love, a scent, if you really like lavender or mint or I don't know, a certain perfume that your grandma used to wear, just whatever it takes. I use lavender. Lavender works for a lot of people. I strongly recommend that you try that and see if it is something that you find relaxing. It could also be textures or touches. I really enjoy smooth, cool fabrics. I got a weighted blanket that is cool. It is a cooling blanket. And so When I need it, I use it. When I don't need it, I put it at the foot of my bed, but it's there when I need it. Honestly, the more of these things you can have in your bag, the better, because sometimes something's not going to work for you. Like I almost always do well with lavender, but every once in a while, I just don't want to smell anything. And I'm like, please take it away before I scream and pull my hair out. That's fine. Just find a variety of things that you find calming and soothing. Sixth thing, I'm going to run out of fingers, is to practice mindfulness, which is a type of meditation. It's the one that I'm the most familiar with, so that's why I suggest this one in particular, although meditation has been shown in general to help with things like anxiety and depression. The way that I learned mindfulness was partially through yoga practice, and that's an awesome thing for you to do. So if you like it at all, do that. The bulk of my knowledge about meditation and mindfulness came from reading books and following the exercises of Thich Nhat Hanh, who is a Buddhist monk, and he's amazing. I could gush. I will link in the description below his book that I read first. It's called The Miracle of Mindfulness. And he has a variety of books that cover a lot of different situations. The really nice thing about it is there are a ton of easy meditation techniques that you can fold into what you're already doing in your life. Okay, you don't have to set aside half an hour or an hour. You don't have to have a room set aside for meditation. You don't need any special equipment. You just need to have a drive in the car or some dishes to do. And we all have those things. So I know you can do it. Also, if you have kids who are struggling, or if you just want to start at a super basic level, he also does have some children's books. So, check it out. Seventh one, I kind of went back and forth on whether or not I was going to include this. Not because it's not really important, but because it's something that gets said to people a lot and it can feel really invalidating. And it is the need for physical activity. So often people are told, you know what, you're not depressed, or maybe you are depressed, but you just need to move. You just need to get out of the house. Okay, when I had my biggest depressive episode, I've had several, but my biggest depressive episode, I laid on a couch every minute that I didn't need to be driving my kids to and from school or drag myself up to make them some macaroni. And I knew I had to eat, so I got a jar of peanut butter and a spoon, and I would force myself to eat at least a bite or two of peanut butter. I would often throw in chocolate chips to bribe myself, although I really didn't want to take the time to eat the chocolate chips either. Guys, it was bad. It was really bad. And one of the things that ended up helping was that I started moving a little bit. If someone had told me in the middle of that depressive episode, start going for runs, I wouldn't have even laughed at them because I wouldn't have had the energy or cared to put out the effort, but it never would have happened. You do not have to start with a full-on exercise routine or an exercise routine at all. It doesn't have to be like that. It could just be getting up off the couch, walking to the kitchen. If that's further than you typically go, that's a win. If maybe the next week after walking to the kitchen and back every day, you can manage to go out on your porch and sit in the sun for 5 minutes, that's a huge win. That is honestly major progress. And find these little things that you can do for yourself. And this is with anxiety as well. It can be really hard to do a good exercise if you're so anxious you can hardly leave your house. Okay, so don't. Sit on the floor and do 10 sit-ups. Congratulations, you just did more physical activity than you did yesterday, and it is going to help. So often when we're in these mental health states, it's really hard to feel like if we don't do it all the way, then there's no point in doing it. I'm throwing it all out the window. And I'm preaching to myself here big time right now. So 5 yards, throw away that piece of trash that you were thinking about leaving on the floor. That is a win. Celebrate it. And just keep going a little bit at a time until you can go outside and take a 5-minute walk or a 10-minute walk. And if that's all you do, honestly, that's typically what I do is take a 10 or 15-minute walk outside. And that's all I need to help me maintain a better mood. It really does help. And it really is super nice to have these little things that you can celebrate as just being like a huge win and a success, and allow yourself to celebrate that. I should have added that as another thing. Celebrate your successes, even if it feels small. Everything you do matters. So we're on 8. Routines. Routines can be super tough when you're not feeling good. So, same thing as with finding your calming aids, set up your routines when you're feeling good. And these could be bedtime routines, they could be daytime routines. What do you normally do when you first get up? What do you do? Include some self care. You guys know I talk about that all the time. It needs to be part of your routine. You're 5 minutes out in the sunlight. Do you do that right after you get home from work? Do you do it right after you drop the kids off at school? Do you do it right after you finish your homework or right before you finish your homework? Stick it in there. Make sure that you try to include things like taking a shower or a bath if that's something that helps you feel better. I know I really struggle with that when I'm having a bad time. Bedtime routine, that's the one that I really, 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 really feel like is the most important. If you're going to pick one, daytime or bedtime, pick bedtime. Bedtime routines like turning off screens at a certain time, always doing your self-care like toothbrushing, face washing in the same order, getting into bed at the same time, reading a book or listening to relaxing sounds or doing a meditation or whatever it is. Establish a bedtime routine. There are a couple of reasons for this. One is because when you're anxious or depressed, again, your sleep schedule gets screwed, and having a routine can really help you kind of stabilize that. Another thing is that if you establish this while you're doing well and you start to notice that you're beginning to slip, that even though you're doing your routine is half-hearted or your sleep is still messed up and disturbed, that can be a really good early indicator that you're starting to struggle. And just like any illness, if you catch it early in the onset, you're going to have an easier time recovering. If you catch yourself early on, oh, I'm starting to not sleep at night, my anxiety must be going up, or oh, I'm just starting to fall asleep 2 hours before I'm supposed to go to bed, my depression must be starting to kick in, or however you experience that. Sorry, that's the way I experience it. That doesn't mean it's the same for everyone. You know that you're starting to struggle. And then you can kick in with your calming aids, with your physical activity, making sure that you're talking to your friends and family and telling them, hey, I'm starting to slip a little bit. So kind of like pull for me. You'll recover much better and more smoothly that way. The ninth item to keep in your mental health care, really, toolkit is journaling. In the religious culture that I grew up in, journaling is really pushed as something that's super important to do so that your children and your children's children can read and learn from your life. I think sometimes, though, this can put a weird pressure on people when they really think about, oh, my grandchildren, my great-grandchildren, getting to know me by reading what I wrote down. And there's this tendency to really filter yourself and only write down the good stuff or write down the things that you're proud of. But that's not really the point of a journal. And really the point of a journal is to get things out of your head. We talked before about how, yeah, it's all in your head. And sometimes getting the thoughts that are aggravated by your condition out of your head and onto paper or screen in whichever format you choose is a really good way to help you start unpacking that and also to stop hearing it over and over and over and over and over and over again. There are a lot of different types of journaling. If you are not someone who likes to write by hand, obviously you can use a computer. Although if you have not tried journaling by hand, I recommend it. There is some really great connections between your brain and the movement that you do when you're writing that can be really healthy. There is bullet journaling, which frankly I don't know much about. It looks too chaotic for me, but if that is the kind of like not so organized way that you like to do things, then maybe look into bullet journaling. There's sketch journaling. I have a sibling who is extremely artistic, and when they need to process stuff, a lot of the time they just draw, and it doesn't have to be a whole big picture. You could just have one sketchbook that is specifically for your journaling, and it's just a bunch of little doodles about how you're feeling that day and how things have gone. It really lets you organize your thoughts, make lists of things that you actually do need to remember. That's always helpful for me. Get that out of my head on paper so I'm not sitting there worrying I'm going to forget it. And then also it gives you something to look back on later, so that we talked about celebrating milestones. Looking back on where you were a year ago can sometimes be super helpful, both to see, yes, I can celebrate that I am doing so much better now. Or if it's the flip, if you've had a backslide, to look back a year ago and say, you know what? I have been at this level before and I can get there again, because you absolutely can. The 10th thing that I recommend you have in your mental health care toolkit as an option is medication. Now, if you've been around for a while, you know I have done a whole video on this before. Medication is often even more taboo than having depression or anxiety is in the first place, which can make it really difficult to accept and be willing to go on a medication. I always think, though, of a doctor who once said to me, listen, if the issue was diabetes and you needed insulin, we would hand it to you and you would say, awesome, thank you so much. If the issue has to do with your brain, people question, they second guess, they just never are quite sure why or if they should try it. The answer, if you're thinking about whether or not you should try a mental health medication, is probably yes. And again, I'm not a mental health care professional. You need to check in with a therapist, with your physician before you try to start any medications, and make sure that you're taking them correctly. I have been taking medication now for 10 years, 11 years maybe. And I remember the person that spoke that finally talked me into it is he was speaking about how different it had been for him after he got on medication. And I asked him afterward, I was like, well, what about the side effects? What if there are long-term negative health consequences? I'm really worried that if I go on this medication, I'm never coming off and I will be on it until I die. And it could kill, what if it kills me? What if it takes a few years off my life? Which, by the way, is a completely irrational fear. There's no research that says that. No, there's not. But I was worried about it. And he said, I've kind of had that thought too. And the conclusion that I always come to is that I would rather have a slightly shorter life that I enjoy than have a longer life where I'm suffering the whole time. And I was like, that's a good point. It's a really good point. It can take a while to find the right medication. I have tried, I think, 3 or 4 different medications now, and I'm on one that I love. It's fantastic. But even despite the fact that it took me this long to find the right one for me, even the first couple that I tried, there was a major difference. And I still remember that first day when my medication worked. It was my birthday. We went out. We went to lunch. I ate my lunch. We hung out and went shopping. Our plans changed in the middle of the date. I was able to change plans and we had a great time. And that sounds like such an easy, simple thing. But at the time, I was suffering so much with my mental health that I may as well have been confined to my bed. I could not deal with plan changes. If that would have completely thrown me off, I would have fallen apart. I could not eat an entire meal while sitting in a restaurant. I could not have gone out window shopping afterwards. It would have just been too much. I would have been a nervous wreck. I remember my husband saying, wow, I'm surprised you lasted this long. And I was like, yeah, me too. And I still feel really good. Weird. And I remember leaving my house and noticing the sunshine on my face and being like, sunshine, where have you been the last, I don't know how many years? I was there the whole time. I just wasn't experiencing it because of the way my brain was processing the world. And that's not something, again, that's wrong with you. It just means that, your brain isn't functioning quite correctly. So stop beating yourself up for something you cannot control and that no one should expect you to control, and get the medication that you need. Just like, something like diabetes or heart disease, this can run and ruin your life. And taking medication is not the only thing you need to do in either of those conditions or in this case. There are other things you need to do. There are other steps you need to take, like, therapy and journaling and exercise. And a lot of those things are good for diabetes and heart disease as well. See your doctor, right? Exercise, eat well. These are all good things when you have a condition. So don't throw out the thought of medication just because it makes you feel more broken. You are not broken. You have a disease and you need to treat it. Keep in mind with medication is that for some people, it's a one-time thing. They go on it for a year, kind of like they do therapy for a year or however long. I'm just throwing out a year. And then you come off of it and you're fine. But I know for a lot of people, that's just not the case. Similar to needing to go back to therapy every once in a while, you're probably going to have to get back on medication. I have gone on and off medication over the last 10 years multiple times, not just because I didn't like medication, also because I thought, I've, learned all this stuff and now I don't need it anymore. I'm fine. I wish I could say that I was that way. I wish that, without my medication, I was fully functioning, but I'm just not. And I've accepted that about myself. I fully plan to be on this medication unless something drastic happens until the day I die. But I also plan on enjoying the heck out of my life instead of staying on my bed or on my couch afraid to fall asleep because I am terrified of the thoughts that come to me about what I should do to myself before I fall asleep. I don't have to live with that anymore. And you don't either. You don't. The final item in your toolkit is going to be extremely personal depending on you and your beliefs. Okay? If you're a religious person, this is going to be a kind of, it's the spiritual aspect of this. For me, I'm religious. So that means a connection to God for me, to the God that I believe in and worship. If you are not religious, this might mean just kind of getting in connection with yourself. And with really what it comes down to is figuring out what gives you peace more than anything else. This is not about self-soothing necessarily, like calming sounds and things. Those are great, but you're looking for things that you connect with on a level that internally, in your heart, in your soul, if you believe in a soul, bring you peace. For me, there are a few religious songs that I really like that make me feel that way. There are a couple of scriptures that I can read that get me that way, because a lot of the time it seems like well-meaning people will suggest, oh, you should read this motivational thing. You should listen to this. It'll make you feel better. You'll get back up on your feet. And they mean well, and they really want to give you that feeling of peace. But to me, at least, trying to read those things or hear those things when I'm in that headspace, it's just like, it may as well just be bouncing off my forehead. It's not going in at all. And I just get more frustrated with myself because it's not going in. It's just staying out there somewhere. So I have made a point of finding, like I said, a few pieces of music, a few scriptures, meditation or prayer, if those are things that you do, talks that you really enjoy from people whose voices are soothing and that are really uplifting. Just take the time, again, when you're not completely wound up or completely depressed, if you can. If you've been in a depressive episode or an anxious episode for 6+ months, or for any period of time, if you're in one right now, okay, don't wait. Start looking right now. Don't wait to get help. Don't wait to help yourself in whatever way you can. When I am really, really wound up, this is the kind of stuff that I can listen to and it won't irritate the heck out of me. And it does just bring me a feeling of, okay, everything is going to be okay. I feel horrible right now. I feel like I'm going to die. But it is going to be okay. I am going to make it through this and it will be all right. So just another thing to keep in your toolkit. Keep an eye out for the things that bring you that inner peace. And for those of you who are more religious, who believe in a creator of some kind, I do want to share with you just my belief that our creator does not judge us or hate us or look down on us for having these struggles any more than he would a child who was born, without a limb, or someone who went through a surgery and then was no longer capable of living the life that they did before. It's just not what happens. It's not how it works. He loves you. They love you. However you view them, there is love there for you. The universe is just, I don't know how to put it, except to just tell you that there is love there for you. Not anger, not frustration, not despair, just love and the desire to help. Okay, so that was the mental health care toolkit that I recommend everyone have. Whatever your situation, whether you're currently suffering from these things or you have in the past, even if there's a chance that you could in the future, and yes, there is a chance. There's always a chance. Because like I said, this is an illness. It's not a weakness. So it could happen. These are good things to know. These are good things to have in hand. So hopefully this is of some help to you. Make sure to check out the extra links in the description for more useful information about meditation and for the graphic that goes with all of this. If there are any questions I can answer for you about my personal experiences, I make a point of being completely open about that. Feel free to ask in the comments. If there's any interest in maybe a support person mental health care kit or toolkit. I could definitely put one together with my husband, who has been my main support person for the last 15 years. And, he would know, as well as me being able to offer some insights into what might be helpful. And if you've got family or friends, or you just want to be prepared if anybody ever does have an issue, I would be happy to do that. So, comment if that would be something that you would like to see. I would love to know. And to step back from the more serious topics, of course, come back to the channel on Saturdays to be read to if you would like some story time. As always, and obviously, especially with the topic of this video, do something nice for yourself today. If it's eating a little bit better, adding a carrot stick, if it's going out on your porch for that 5 minutes of sunlight, you deserve it. You deserve it today. So do it. Okay? I am sending you all the virtual hugs that I can, and I will see you guys next time. Bye.